In this lecture, we'll add some functionality to our checkpoint chunk prefab so that when we cross our checkpoint, we add 5 seconds to our timer. Now that we actually have our checkpoint chunk prefab properly being instantiated on our bridge, let's just add some functionality to it by creating a custom C# script called checkpoint. Let's go add that to our scripts proc.gen folder. I'll right click and create a new monobehavior script. Let's just call this checkpoint. Once we have that created, let's go add that to our checkpoint chunk prefab. So prefabs, chunks, and find our checkpoint chunk. Make sure I add it to the right one, add a component, and we'll just add the checkpoint class. I'd like to introduce the checkpoint functionality as a challenge for you. Once again, kind of a multifaceted, multi-step challenge should you like to take it on. Increase our timer by 5 seconds every time we cross a checkpoint chunk. Here are a few steps that we'll actually like to take to make sure that we can actually achieve that goal. You'll need to add a trigger volume to your checkpoint, create a public function somewhere on your game manager to increase your timer, and use onTriggerEnter on our checkpoint class to fire the public function in our game manager when our player enters. That'll give you the basic layout for how to achieve something like this. Throughout that process, you'll have a few different software architecture type decisions on how you'd like to go about doing it. Pause the video, give it an honest effort, and when you come back, we'll go through my solution together. Welcome back. Before I jump into my checkpoint class, I'm actually just going to go ahead and set up my trigger volume. So right here, just directly attached to my checkpoint parent, I'm going to go ahead and add a box collider. And I'll make sure I make this a trigger so we can actually just trigger it when our player walks through. Let's actually just make it 15 to make sure my player never misses it. And 15 on the Y. Something like this looks pretty good. That way, whenever our player crosses this checkpoint chunk prefab, right at the point where we basically cross this checkpoint chunk text, our player will trigger whatever sort of on-trigger event we create. Nice. With that created, let's go ahead and open up the checkpoint class. So let's have a think about what we're actually going to need. We're going to need some sort of serialized field that we can pass through our game manager for a float for the amount of time that we'd actually like to increase our time every time we walk through the checkpoint. So you could put that in the game manager, I suppose, but I think it makes more sense for me to put it inside of our checkpoint and then pass it through as an argument to our game manager. So serialized field, I'll create a float. I'll just call this checkpoint time extension, and I'll initialize that to 5 seconds. Next, we're going to need a reference to our game manager to call that public function that we haven't yet created. So we kind of have our first software architecture type decision. We need a reference to our game manager. We could actually inject that using dependency injection into our checkpoint to just pass that reference along from our level manager to our chunk to our checkpoint chunk. But you know what? In this case, we're only instantiating it every 8 chunks. So I'm actually pretty comfortable myself just using find first object by type in this case. Not only for the sake of time, but because we're only doing it every 8 chunks, I know that I'm never actually going to reach any sort of performance bottleneck using it. So right on start, I'll just set game manager equal to find first object by type, and we're looking for our game manager. I don't think we're going to need an update function. However, we are going to need an onTriggerEnter function. So in this onTriggerEnter function, we just want to actually trigger it only when our player actually crosses. If we don't actually have some sort of check to make sure that it's just our player, our obstacles will also fire this onTriggerEnter event. So we just want to say, if this is our player, then go ahead and do something. Well, you could actually go about doing this by grabbing the component on this other.gameObject collider, or we could actually use the player tag as we've done before. I think we can just go ahead and grab that. Let's create a const string just as we've done before. I'll call it player string, and we'll set that equal to capital player, the same tag that we've used previously. We'll just go ahead and check if other.compareTag is our player string. Then we can go ahead and go into our game manager and actually fire some sort of public function. We haven't created that, so let's just actually comment this out for now and pop over to our game manager class. So Control P, I'll search for my game manager, and we'll go ahead and open that up. In our game manager, we just need to create a public function that we can access. I'll do this right below update. I'll create a public void. I'll call it increase time. And in here, we just pass through that float that we created as a serialized field in our checkpoint. I'll call it amount, and we'll just take time left, I believe is what we call it, plus equals amount. I'll just delete this private keyword down below in our decrease time to keep things consistent. Let's pop over to our checkpoint class and actually finish that off. So we can go ahead and uncomment game manager and increase time and just pass through our checkpoint time extension. And I believe we're all set to go. Let's pop over to Unity and give that a try. All right, blow up my game view, and we'll go ahead and give it a second. As we cross this checkpoint, we can pick up a few apples along the way, and let's keep our eye over on the top left. Yeah, there you go. We added 5 seconds. There's not a lot of visual feedback. It might be cool if you either triggered some sort of particle effect, maybe some sort of sound, maybe some sort of camera zoom in effect. I'm not exactly sure what might look best, but some sort of visual feedback for the player might look nice. This is kind of the first time that you could consider we've reached our game's MVP, or the minimum viable product. But we've still got a ways to go, adding some juice to our game and just sprucing up the overall look and feel of our game. When you're ready to move on, I'll see you in the next lecture.